Hello my friends, in today's video I want to share with you my Postural Orthostatic Tachycardia syndrome or POTS story. Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. If you have been here before, if you're brand new, hey, I'm Aimee Esther. I'm so glad to have you here. If you would please hit that subscribe button, I promise you will not regret it, especially if you live with POTS or other chronic illnesses, you have chronic fatigue and pain, and you suffer from mental and physical illness. You're definitely going to want to be subscribed because I make videos about life with chronic illness multiple times a week. I'm sharing with you all the secrets about how to live a beautiful, wonderful life while living chronically ill. I promise it's possible. If you've seen my videos before, you know that. You have witnessed how I live such a wonderful life while living chronically ill, and I know that you can too. So make sure you subscribe so you don't miss when I post a new video every week about all things chronic illness. So today we are talking about POTS, Postural Orthostatic Tachycardia syndrome. If you don't know what POTS is, I'm going to leave the video linked in the description below that I talk about POTS. I explain what it is, and okay, I just go into all the details about POTS, the symptoms and all the things. Today though, I'm just talking about myself. Today we're going to talk about me, my story. I'm going to share with you, where it started and up till now, what has happened and how I got diagnosed, all the things. Let's talk about it. So first, let's go way back. Growing up, I was healthy. I didn't have any chronic illnesses. I had, of course, random things. I weirdly got kidney stones a lot, like every year since I was like 8, which is kind of weird. And I had just, weird things come up here and there. I had chronic migraines starting in high school, and I had endometriosis. And those were kind of the big things that caused me physical problems, but it didn't stop me from living my life. Everything else, I seemed to be totally healthy and normal. I could eat whatever I wanted. I could do whatever I wanted. And I didn't seem to have any problems outside of those small things. But then I got married. And I have the most wonderful husband in the world. He's amazing. We got married, and a week later, I got food poisoning. And my husband got it too. We both got food poisoning, and his went away within about 24 hours, and mine never did. So that food poisoning turned into a small intestine bacterial overgrowth. For more on that, I do have a video on my SIBO story. I'll link that down below, but I turned into SIBO, or small intestine bacterial overgrowth, and that was a whole nother thing. Took forever to get diagnosed with that, but I basically had a lot of stomach issues, GI issues, I should say. That was a lot of sounds. That was hard to say. Anyway, I had a lot of GI problems, and it was just all of them. So I got married in March, and I had those GI issues just continue. And I tried a lot of different doctors and tried different things that they thought it was. And that continued until around September. I was like, okay, this has been months and months, and the treatments that they were telling me is ulcers and stuff like that. And it's like, this is not working. I need to go see a specialist. So that's when I went to go see a GI specialist, was around September of that year. And at the same time, I was finishing up my college degree. So I had finished my schooling part of my degree, and in September of that year, I started student teaching. I was student teaching as a math and health teacher. Pretty fun combo. I know that sounds weird, but on A days, I did math, and on B days, I did health. I taught health. So I was student teaching at that time, and I was just having a lot of GI issues, and I was like, this is super weird. And I went to a GI doctor. I started to get more tests done with him. It wasn't really coming up with anything. And right around this time when I started student teaching, from about September to December, I got significantly worse. And not my stomach issues, but everything else. It was almost like my stomach issues just started to spread and spread throughout my whole body. So about a month into student teaching, the school had an opening, and I applied to it, and I was hired as a teacher. So I was actually a student teacher and a hired paid teacher at the same time. I still had to finish my student teaching semester. I had to do all the assignments for student teaching and have meetings and, all that stuff that they make you do. And I was a full-time teacher, getting paid to teach as well as student teach. It's kind of weird, but I did both of those. And so it was a very, I guess you'd say stressful. I loved it, so I didn't really feel stressful, but I think it was like a good stressful, if that makes sense, because I was doing a lot. I was trying to get a lot of things done, and I was still pretty newly married. I hadn't even been married a year. We were still figuring out our lives together. My husband was in school, and there was just all of that. We were just trying to figure things out. And I was kind of overworked at that time. And so that is when my body just started to shut down. And it moved from being GI issues to just extreme fatigue and muscle aches, especially in my legs. My legs would ache so bad, and I would get really dizzy, and I was just so sick. Like, I just felt like I had the flu all the time, and I knew it wasn't the flu because it just never ended. Every few weeks there was like a new symptom popping up, and there was just a new thing going on. And so by December of that year, I finally finished my student teaching portion. And so there was like that big kind of weight lifted off my shoulders. I officially graduated from college, and I already had my job, which was nice. But I was like, what is going on? This is just not good. And Christmas break of that year, I decided to get endometriosis surgery, because I knew I had endometriosis, like I said, from the beginning. And that was the one thing that I'd had for so long that I thought maybe that's, getting on my GI tract, or maybe that's causing problems, because I've heard crazy things can happen with endo. And so I got that removed during Christmas break of school, and it did nothing. And that's a whole nother story for another day. We can talk about endometriosis, but it didn't help any of my other symptoms. And that is when I started going to more and more doctors to try to figure this out. I was getting so confused, and I would get off work and I just lay down and watch TV the rest of the night because I couldn't get off the couch to do anything. My house was a disaster. My poor husband, I was just the worst wife, because not only was I not physically doing things, I wasn't, able to cook much, I wasn't able to clean much, but also I was just getting so depressed. And around this time, after that surgery, around January of that next year, was when I really started to see my mental health declining. And a job that I thought just made me so happy, and it was my dream job at the time, was becoming miserable because I was so sick. And that was making me more depressed, because I was like, I love teaching, I want to teach, but I feel like I can't show up to my best self because I'm just so sick all the time. So over those next few months, from about January to April, was me just trying everything to figure this out, and still trying to work at the same time. So I was still working, I was still teaching, and I was going to a million doctors. I tried more of the natural approach with more holistic type doctors, chiropractors. I tried every specialist you can think of, neurologists, endocrinologists, internists. I don't even know all the lists, because I think I saw every doctor you could possibly see. And I just started to get worse and worse. And I would notice that when I laid down, I felt better, but I didn't really think anything of that at the time. I just thought, I'm exhausted and I need to lay down. But I remember going to church, actually, and being so sick sitting at church, and I just could not sit through the 3-hour church block. And I would just have to go home in the middle of church every single week because I couldn't sit. I couldn't sit in a chair. And then at school, I was miserable, but I pushed through. And I remember planning out days that I could miss. I would plan out, okay, test day is this day, so I'm going to stay home sick that day. And it was because I knew I'd be sick, because I was always sick. And so I'd plan those days out ahead of time of when can I be sick, when do I need to be there for my students. And I was using as minimum as possible of my sick days, but I was starting to use them up. And I went to a holistic doctor, naturopath doctor, I don't know what you would call him, but he had me do what's called ultraviolet blood irradiation treatment, UBI treatment, where they take your blood out, they zap it with UV rays, and they send it back in. I don't really know what it was supposed to do, but everyone there claimed that it was just this miracle worker and that it made you feel so amazing and you had so much energy, and it killed me. Okay, not literally, that was dramatic, but it just made me so sick, like extremely exhausted, where I couldn't get out of bed. And I ended up calling the principal of the school and saying, I'm going through this treatment right now. I need to take all the rest of my sick days. I need to use all of them while I'm doing this because I can't get out of bed after I get these treatments done. And I think I was doing them twice a week for like 2 weeks or something. And at this time, I had so many people tell me like, this thing's gonna cure you, this thing's amazing, this is the answer for you. Not really thinking it through as like, maybe it's not the answer for me. Just like trusting people. And that was kind of the same thing with this UBI treatment, is I just trusted them. And not that that's a problem, but it was definitely not good for me. And now realizing that POTS causes your blood not to circulate well, of course that kind of thing would probably not be good for me. But it was awful. And after I finished those treatments, I was like, okay, I'm just got to make it till the end of the year. Because this was around, I think it was like beginning of April of that year. And the school year ended at the end of May. So I had about 2 months left. I just kept telling myself, I just have to make it to the end of the year. And then during summer break, I'm going to figure this out. Like that was my goal. That was my plan. After going to so many doctors, I was like, I am not getting better. And I remember feeling crazy. I remember feeling like this has to all be in my head. And I went for a time, like right around that time in April, where I told myself, this is all in your head. This pain isn't real. What you're experiencing is not real, because you go to doctors, they tell you your blood work is totally normal. Like, I cannot even tell you how much blood work I've had. In fact, I've had doctors tell me, I'm going to guess that you're anemic because you have had so much blood work done. That's what they always say, which is so ironic because that was making me worse, taking more blood out, because I already was struggling with POTS unknowingly, and then I kept getting all this blood work done week after week, which was only making me sicker. And one thing that I remembered from getting my blood work is every time I go in, I would tell them, just so you know, usually I have to get poked a few times. And every single time the nurse would say, oh, don't worry, I never miss. And then they'd miss. And I'd say, sorry, I just have small veins. And we'd laugh about it and be like, oh yeah, you have such tiny veins. And they'd try 3 or 4 times. And I knew the vein that usually they could get. But it's so funny because I see all these little signs like that I didn't notice at that time. And I remember once around this time talking to a doctor and saying, my feet are ice cold and purple. And he looked at them and said, oh, it's just cold in here. And I'm like, oh, okay, yeah. And just like signs that were so clear that I had POTS, and having to put my feet up when I was at church, or noticing that when I lay down, I feel significantly better than when I'm sitting up and I'm standing. Like those things I just didn't notice. So anyway, back to my story. So it gets to be the end of April. I had 4 weeks left in the school year, 4 weeks left to teach until I got a whole summer break and could rest. And I just knew that I couldn't do it anymore. I only had 4 weeks left and I could not stand anymore. And it's so crazy because at the time I felt so crazy. Like, why can I not stand and teach these kids? Like, if I'm just in pain, it seems like it would be easy to just distract myself and teach. But why can I not stand all day long and teach these kids? Like, why is that so hard for me? That shouldn't be that hard, is what kept going through my head. And now it's so crazy to look back and be like, that was the worst job for me, to be standing all day long and teaching. That no wonder I was so sick, and no wonder I'd get home and could not get off the couch. No wonder I needed help walking up the stairs because I was trying to stand all day long, not knowing that I had postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. So I hit that point where I was like, I can't do this anymore. And I talked to my husband and I said, I'm going to quit. And he's like, hey, I support you. Let's quit. And at the time, my husband was actually working part-time and going to school full-time. And I was really stressed because I'm like, I don't know how we're going to pay for everything. So we ended up moving in with my in-laws and we set all that up. We got out of the rental place we were at and we got prepared to move in with my in-laws. And then I had to go talk to the principal of my school. And I went to talk to him and I said, I'm so sick. I am quitting. I can't teach anymore. And he looked not happy with me. He was not very happy. I remember it was a Wednesday that I talked to him, middle of the week. And the next Monday was our end of level testing for my kids. And that was a really big deal to him. And so he's like, well, how about you just stay until end of level testing? And I was a very passive person at that time. I'm doing better about it now, but I was very passive. And I said, okay, fine. I guess I can make it. And I went back to the classroom and I just started crying because I was like, I don't know why I just said that I can do this because I can't. Like, I know it's just a week longer, but I don't think I can get up and teach for another week. Like this, I don't know. I felt crazy because I didn't have a diagnosis. Everyone said nothing was wrong with me. I couldn't even tell the principal, like, hey, I have this condition. Like, I just would have preferred that someone told me, like, you have this really serious condition so that I had a reason for my pain. But I felt so crazy at that time. So I go back to my classroom and I'm crying and the vice principal comes in and he said, Aimee, you are not coming in tomorrow. You are not coming in again. I have this program you can sign up for that basically it's called catastrophic leave. It's basically like a disability leave that would get me paid for the rest of the year because, like I said, I used all of my paid leave at that point. And so I signed up for that, but I didn't know if that would go through or not. I just knew that I couldn't work anymore. I didn't care about the money. I just thought, we're going to figure this out. I knew my husband wasn't making much. He was still in school. But I just knew I couldn't do it. And that vice principal made me feel so much better that, like, okay, at least he believes me that I'm really sick. Because, yeah, it did seem kind of crazy to, like, a week before end of levels to quit your job. But I went home that day and I felt this weight lifted off my shoulders. And I prayed and prayed that we'd be able to work everything out. And I knew that I was heard. I knew that I wasn't alone in that moment because I just felt like that was the right decision. I felt this weight lifted off my shoulders. Mentally, of course, physically, there was still a big weight there because I was having a lot of pain. But I got home and crazy blessings. My husband ended up getting a promotion. He was working part-time. He was kind of doing like a part-time school, part-time work and school, and the company he was working for hired him full-time and offered to pay for his school for the rest of the year. And mind you, they didn't know about me. They didn't know all of this was going on. So that was definitely a blessing from above. I know 100% without a doubt that was, because it was literally the week after I quit my job, he got hired on full-time. And he started doing night classes and working during the day. So he was literally gone all day, every day. He was at work till 4 p.m., 4 or 5, and then he had school from like 5:30 to 9:30 every night. And so I never saw him, and the poor guy, we need to do another video with him soon, him talking about this time, because man, that poor guy, like, I'm sure he was like, why did I marry this girl? But he's amazing, and I'm so grateful for him. But after that, he was gone all the time, and I was home all the time. And we decided, okay, let's do what we can to get as many appointments as we can with as many people and figure this out. And I went to doctor after doctor after doctor that next month, probably for about a month. And I was told, you just have fibromyalgia. And not that I don't believe fibromyalgia is a real thing. In fact, I still think I have fibromyalgia with some of the symptoms that aren't explained by POTS. But I just didn't feel right about that diagnosis because it didn't come from a place of knowledge from the doctor that diagnosed me with it. It didn't feel like it was from knowledge. It felt like it was, I'm giving up on you. I don't know what it is, so we'll just call it fibromyalgia, because that's basically what he said to me. We don't know what's going on, so we're just going to label it this and go from there. And so that was really hard for me because I didn't feel right about that. I just didn't feel like that was the full picture. I just knew there was something else going on. I had talked to people who had fibromyalgia. And I looked up a lot about fibromyalgia, and it just seemed very different than what I was experiencing. Like, of course, some of it was similar, like I said, but it was not where I couldn't stand. Like, I was going to pass out. I felt like I was passing out every time that I stood. I couldn't remember anything when I was standing up. I had just terrible, terrible brain fog. Anyway, you know all the symptoms if you have POTS. But after that, I just decided to give up. I decided I'm just going to take this fibromyalgia diagnosis and run with it, and I'm going to figure things out on my own. So I got to a point where I was better, where I felt like I could manage it okay. Like, I was definitely in less pain, but it was mostly because I was laying around all day. And then I found the exercise helped me, eating certain ways kind of helped me, and so I just found like little things that gave me a little bit of help. And I also worked on my mental health a lot because I was so incredibly depressed at that time. That was probably the biggest thing, was just a mindset change. Anyway, that's a story for another day. Wow, this story, it's just, there's a lot. So I'll try to make this last part quick. But basically I just decided I'm going to live with it and I'm going to move on with my life. And so we started our family. That was a whole nother process. That took a couple years. And I got pregnant with my daughter, and I knew that I could take care of her. I just thought I'd be a mom that laid around a lot, but I knew that I could do it, and I just knew that was the right path for me. And so during my pregnancy, I was about 6 months pregnant, I went with my husband to visit some family members. And this family member actually also has POTS. At the time, I didn't really know what POTS was, but she also has it, and she told me that she has to wear these socks, and I was just like, wow, I wish that I could solve my problems with socks. And that was my thought there. And then she said, yeah, and I eat a lot of salt. And I was like, wow, I really wish that was my problem, because socks seems like a really easy solution, and I crave salt all the time. And I didn't think much of that. I just thought that was just me. Like, I just like salty things. But I craved salt all the time. And when we got home from that trip, I didn't think much of what of her treatment or her chronic illness, because I had had so many people tell me things before, or I'd look stuff up and get obsessed with it and be like, oh, maybe I have this thing. And then I'd go to the doctor and I didn't have it, blah, blah, blah. So I didn't think much of it. And then we got home and my husband was like, you got to try those socks. I just feel like you should try them. And I was like, no, I'm not trying those. How many times has someone said this miracle thing helped me and it did nothing for me? Sorry, I feel like my throat was really dry. So try to finish this really quick. Okay, anyway, so I decided, fine, I will try these stupid socks. And so I borrowed some of my mother-in-law's running socks, compression socks. I guess I should specify. They were compression socks. If you have POTS, you probably already know that. And I tried these running compression socks, and I had so much energy that day. And I was like, that was totally coincidence. There's no way these socks are helping me. And the next day I wore them again, same thing. I had way more energy than I did before. I felt less dizzy. I felt, less of all the symptoms. My muscle pain seemed significantly better. And I was like, okay, maybe there's some things to these. So the next day I didn't wear them, and I felt terrible again. And that's when I was like, oh my gosh, I think these socks might actually help me. So I ordered some medical socks, some tighter ones, and it was like night and day. I could not believe the difference that these were making for me. And I just wanted to like jump up and down and scream. I was so happy that I found something. At 6 months pregnant, I had more energy than the last like however many years it was. I just had so much energy. So I posted about it on Instagram. I have had an Instagram account where I shared kind of about my chronic illness journey. Mostly it was food because I don't know, I just didn't ever share my face at that point. So it was mostly food at that time. But I shared on Instagram, these socks are really helping me. And someone messaged me and said, girl, that sounds like POTS. That's what I had. And when she told me that, I was like, I've heard of POTS before, but I just had heard that you pass out all the time. And I had never passed out. I felt like I was all the time, but I never actually passed out at that point. And so I was like, that's not what I have. And she's like, no, really just go look it up. Look at this Dysautonomia International website, which is a great website if you have POTS. It's really awesome. So I went there and I was like, oh my gosh, this sounds exactly like me. It was like every symptom was what I had. And I read that you should test your heart rate. And so I did. And laying down, my heart rate was 70. I stood up and it was 150. And I was like, I think I just figured out what was wrong with me this whole time. And everything started to align. Like why my blood work would come back normal, but I felt terrible. It's like, of course, because the levels of my blood were normal, there just wasn't enough of it or it wasn't in the right place. And my tiny veins that no one could ever get the blood out was like, oh my gosh, that makes sense. My freezing cold feet that would turn purple, that makes sense. Why taking a shower makes me feel so terrible. Why teaching was the worst job for me. And it just like all started to make sense. And I was so happy. So I called my doctor. I said, dude, I have POTS. And he told me that he had heard of POTS. He knew what it was. And he diagnosed me with it. But I was like, dude, we've been working together for years and you couldn't figure this out. I was kind of frustrated, but also I was just really happy. And I do feel like if I had not gone through that time of not knowing what it was, I would be less grateful for being able to wear socks every day. Because I talk to a lot of people who are like, oh, I have to wear compression socks. It's so hard. And to me, I'm like, oh my goodness, I get to wear compression socks every day and it makes me feel so good and I love it. Now, all of my problems are not gone, but once I started wearing compression socks and I figured out I had POTS, it just made this like exponential growth of my health. I'm just in such a better place now. And just the mental part of it, just knowing that there's a name for what's going on helped me so much. So I make lots of videos about POTS, so I won't go into any more detail. But I did find out I had POTS when I was 6 months pregnant, and it made such a huge difference on being a mother. And I have 2 kids now and just live a beautiful, wonderful life. So if you want more information about living life with chronic illness, make sure you subscribe to my channel. I have no voice anymore. I don't know. I'm just getting a little lightheaded because POTS. So I'm going to go to sleep and drink a lot of water. And I hope you do the same. And I'll see you next week.